Good evening, everyone. We have the extra special guest, master of the arts, the warlock of design, Richard Whitters. It's
Mm-hmm.
good to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, and we gotta always do this guy.
Uh,
Ah.
hello, Winston.
He's down there.
So, when you draw, is he always by your side, or does he just sort of wander in when it's mealtime?
Well, a lot of times, there's two places I draw. Sometimes I draw at my desk, and sometimes I just lay down on the bed and set stuff up and draw there. And if I'm laying on a bed drawing, he's like right there. But if I get
Ah.
up for 2 seconds, he takes my spot. So he'll be like, "I'm laying here." Yeah.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I've
Mm-hmm.
got a I've got a cat who does the same thing, except she's more motivated. Like, hey, it's mealtime. Come on, let's go, let's go.
Yep.
Pony up the good stuff. But that's how things work. So it has been, I think it's been about a year since you were on last time. Many things have changed in the world of
Yes.
art, in the world of tabletop role playing games.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to ask is last time you were on, we were talking about um, self study versus going to a traditional program for people who are interested in careers in the arts.
Yep.
And you had mentioned that you were teaching real life classes.
Yeah.
You don't have the ability to accidentally stream whatever Netflix movie you're watching or whatnot. So
Yeah.
first of all, how is that working out for you? Are you enjoying it? Is it fun?
Um. Yes, and I wasn't like directly teaching. Um. What I did was Algonquin College in Ottawa. They have like a final year program for like concept art, things like that. So what I actually did was um, help them set up the curriculum and sort of give them a challenge or give them their thing to develop, which was a setting me and my friends had made. So I gave them that. I gave them kind of guidelines of how to do it, and gave them reviews. But yeah, I wasn't the teacher in the class every day kind of thing.
Okay,
I popped in, gave feedback, stuff like that. So the
nice.
main thing we were trying to do was, um, like on Magic, I had in large part uh, organized and ran the concept art pushes when we created new
Mhm.
worlds, and made stuff for them. And then when I moved over to D&D, I kind of took that with me. And then when I moved to Larian, I kind of did that stuff for them. Um, so this was sort of, so when they approached me and said, "Hey, could you help us do a curriculum?" I was like, "If you want to know how to do a concept push, I can show you how to do that." Um, so yeah, we basically took them through those steps. Create the world, create the creatures within it, design them, go through and sort of say, "Okay, let's unify this a bit, let's whittle this down." Um, and I posted a link when they finished there. They had a really nice final project where they put everything together, and it was really cool. I have to say, if I do it again, there's a few things I learned, uh, just about um, like how to communicate certain things with the students. You know, um, how to line up some of the themes and things like that. But it was very fun. It was really interesting to see how they
Hmm.
tackled things.
So when you say communicate with the students, do you think it's
Hmm.
the issues were like an experience versus not experienced thing, or do you think it was like a generational thing and just like how people communicate?
I I think it it was a mixture of things. Like it's something I told some it's like a thing I've told some folks before. Um, a lot of people think that coming up with some super original concept is the hardest thing and the coolest thing you could ever do, right? And I used to do a thing when we were doing concept art tests and things like that, where I would say, give me a Death Knight. And that's like, everybody's done a Death Knight, you know what I mean? Like that's cliche and that's that. But the trick is, if you can take that concept, which is very well known, and you might even call it like cliche or whatever. But if somebody can give it a little twist, or give it a unique look, or do something to it to make it original, but still have it be a Death Knight, like don't throw it out, still nail it. And I would think like Lord Soth, for example. He's a Death Knight. He's got a certain unique look to him, and I think it's like sort of the crown helmet and things like that. His design and things, it's like, yeah, that really sticks out. That's not just a dark suit of armor and red eyes or anything. So I think there was some of that, and with students too, they're looking to like. For me, when I was working at Wizards, like it was into the thing of like I was very much a hired gun, That's how I saw myself. So it was like, we want this, and I'd be like, okay, I'll do that. And I think this is a good thing. Students are also younger, and they're sort of like, they've got a lot of ideas they want to get out, right? So I'd say they're really passionate about it. It's a little more unbridled, because they're like, there's this thing I really want to do, So, and then I was, because that's one of the things we were going through and doing, and I was like, you know what? I don't really want to bridle them in too much, But we're also going through that a bit, and kind of like, sometimes in a studio, you may be super excited to be a chef, and you want to try making duck à l'orange. But if the art director asks you for a really good hamburger, just give him a really good hamburger.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious. I've had conversations with people before. I was never the art director for, like a gaming studio or this and that, but I used to work in marketing, where I would be in charge of, getting things together. And one thing that I noticed is that people who are older, such as myself, there was no online school. Maybe there was like a learn art by mail. They had those things. But in general, you went to, whether it was a trade school or a university, and a central part of that was the critique. And for people who do not come from the art world, a critique is basically when everybody in the class, you'll get some assignment, you have to go in front of everybody else, put your stuff on the wall, and you have to defend yourself. And depending on the class, it could be absolutely brutal, especially the classes where they let you bring beer. After like 30 minutes, the critiques got real intense. And I have found, not to say that the art is better from older people to younger people, but I have found in certain instances, even now when I'm commissioning art, if there's something that I don't like, or I ask them like, oh, can you change this or that? Sometimes when I have younger people, like they just deflate on me, and they sort of fall apart, or sometimes I think that like everybody at one time or another has gotten irrationally angry about criticism of the work. But the thing is, like when you would go to those schools, you would get that worked out of your system before you graduated. So by the time you were, off in the world, and somebody shits on your work or something, you'd be like, oh, okay. So that's kind of like, I'm curious if we're heading back, or maybe in Canada the students are a little more mellow, or what's going on.
I'm not sure. Like I can tell you that, like, from critiques, that I went through and had and stuff like that in college, this was about the same, right?
Okay.
Um, uh, like I don't think I noticed any discernible big difference, but because I totally was like, oh yeah, I like working with students, because I was actually where critiques are, let's say, blunt and
Hmm.
brutal, was like magic,
Yeah.
right? Like we were on magic, like, and you would bring people in, and you're sort of like, these are some of the top artists and top fantasy artists in the world, right? And you have a wall full of their stuff, and you take a piece and you pull it off the wall, and you're like, that's not working, and you just toss it.
Yep.
Right? And they're like, okay, and then and you're either like, they're either kind of burnt on it, or they're like, where do you think we should take it? It's like, maybe take it more like this. You talk about it, but it's just like gone. Start fresh, or we'll chuck it to somebody else. Hey, you give it a try, right? So it was very much just like, yep, we're here to hit these things. Didn't really have a lot of like, that is a very in college thing. Like, I'll defend my piece.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, no.
Pretty much.
it's
Pretty
just
much.
like it's just like, nah, that's not working, right?
It,
Like, that's gone, and then they're like, ah, that sucks. It's like, yeah, give it another
yeah.
shot.
Yeah. Especially when somebody's like dangling a check in front of you, you know? It's like, well, I sure would like to get paid
Yep.
this month. So yeah, what do you want? 3
Yeah.
fingers, 8 fingers,
Yep.
take your pick.
Yes. Yep. Well, I think there's another spark though too. It's like solving it. We used to have the concept push, and then we had what we concept art push, and then we'd have a cleanup art push after. The cleanup art pushes were even more brutal, because let's say you had 6 really excellent artists, and they worked for like almost a month creating all this stuff. Well, then you're like, okay, we're going to do cleanup push and tighten some things up. It's like, cool, what are we going to be working on? Everything that they didn't manage to solve. And it's like, you know, Johnny Cash couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like the Beatles couldn't pull it off. We had a lot of great people. And anyway, we got like a couple weeks to try and solve these things that they weren't able to. So that stuff could be pretty rough. But like I said, most people were just kind of like, let's keep trying to nail it,
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
plus when you have let's say a functional art department, I think everybody's like on the same page with, you want the work to be the best that it can be. Not
Yep.
necessarily that everyone's on the same page with what that is, but I think that, when things are working well, I think people do take good faith criticism better than
Yes.
despotic regimes.
Yep.
Do you think that now that you mention it, it got me thinking, especially with like the cleanup process, do you think it's better or worse for artists now that pretty much everything is done digitally? Like if you wanted to ask like Clyde Caldwell, hey, can you make that dragon's arm, whatever, he might be like, okay, well, that means I got to repaint the whole thing. Whereas like now,
Yeah.
that's on a separate layer and it can just be redone. So do you think it's like more futzing with it or less?
Yeah, that is definitely a thing. Like the trend of when I was on Magic, and it was really interesting to watch. Like when I first came, we would get the majority of the art we got for Magic was the actual finished paintings. So people would ship them to us. We would, we had a department that would photograph them and light them properly and all that. And then we would ship the originals back, right? So when I first got there, it was a big thing where it's like, oh, we'd commission, and then the paintings would start coming in. and I'd be like, "Ooh, we just got a box from Voikenbaga, whoa!" Right? Like,
Exactly.
and you couldn't wait. You just open it up and put it on, and we had a place to display them all. And then gradually, it was sort of like more digital art, more digital art. Now, definitely, edits are way easier in digital art. Because if you have to go back into an oil painting or things like that, like depends on what it is, but it's much easier to touch up a piece of digital art. But yeah, then we gradually, near the end of my sort of tenure on Magic, it was mostly digital art. So I kind of went through that whole era of like mostly traditional art, went all the way to like pretty much all digital art. And then there was an interesting thing where we had a couple folks who did Magic stuff, but they still work traditionally. They work with oil or acrylic. And one one of those artists started selling their originals, like original oil paintings, and woo, they were doing really well. So suddenly we had a bunch of artists who were like, I think I want to tackle this one traditionally,
Well,
because then I'll have a piece, like something I can sell, like a physical piece.
and that's what's really interesting to me is if you go to the comic book world and you ask any of the old timers, they all want to do physical media because they get paid for the commission, but the thing is, nobody really has money to pay for books. So they sort of take it on the chin to get to do like a new Wolverine book, or if you're in the indie world or whatever this character is. But then they have the original art to sell, so they can sell that Wolverine thing page by page for like 2-3 times their commission rate for the company that they did for the company. And then they have like the indie books, I've seen guys, they'll like sit on those original drawings for a few years to see if the character rises in popularity. And like when the publisher, especially if it's like if the author is the publisher, they'll wait until like the next one's coming out, and then they'll start selling when the interest goes back up. So physical media really, in my opinion, it's still got a lot of utility for the artist.
Yeah. It's definitely that hit a while back with what were they called, NFTs, as well, because there was sort of contingent of digital artists who were very much like, oh, NFTs means now I can have a digital piece and have it like an original and all that. and that was a long kind of like conversation about what we should do here. That was one of the instances where I was kind of brought in to help advise, because we had like legal team, this, that, like, to kind of go through it and be like, well, how should we handle this? And the NFT thing at the time was very much like brand new, and people were like, this could be the new big thing, and all that. And then, like I said, we had some artists who were really like, hey, this could be an avenue for us. So it was sort of like talking through all that. In the end, they kind of, the biggest thing was the business risk. They kind of said, we don't know. Like, if the bottom drops out of this, it's very much sort of a pyramid-y scheme or bait and switchy kind of thing, and we don't really want to like we want to take that risk. So we won't say 100% no, but we should just wait. So yeah, I kind of waited, and I think NFTs kind of flittered away.
I mean, one of the biggest problems, which I saw right away, is it's supposed to be a one-of-a-kind digital image, as if you bought the original. But the problem is, like, people were selling multiple copies of this NFT of that same image, So it's like, it's the rarity that that makes it worth
Yeah.
something. So Patty's Parlor asks, Richard, how
Mhm.
different is it to be an online commissioned artist rather than a hired artist with a specific company or two? So I guess he means like
Mm.
online commission versus you work directly for the company.
Oh yeah, like in-house versus
Yeah.
freelancing or whatever you want to call it. Um, I've ugh, in-house to me was like once I got my feet under me, like that was the whole thing. When I first started, very much intimidated. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm like, whoo, am I even good enough to be here? You know, like this kind of thing. But as you go on, you sort of like, no, I get this. You know, like we can do this. So in house, it took me a while to get used to it. Um, I find and freelance stuff. I'd done some freelance stuff before that. The freelance stuff, like in the past couple of years, I'm honestly, it's rough to juggle. Um, like I try to, like some people hit me up for some stuff, and I'm like, yep, we can do that, and I try to work it in like a long timeline, and I'm also like working on my own
Yeah, yeah,
thing
yeah.
and like writing and drawing for that. So I could certainly use like a manager. Winston is not great at that. It's really his fault. Um, so what I do find, the upside of it is when people hit me up for stuff, they're generally looking for like my stuff. They're
Yeah.
sort of like, oh, like you're you're Richard. I like your stuff. Can you draw me a Richard?
Mm-hmm.
You know what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like something in your style, right? Um, and that's really cool because it's like, okay, you know what I do, you know what my stuff looks like, and if you got an idea, you know, I can do that for you. Previously, when I was doing freelance stuff, I never knew what I was going to do. Like I did medical
Mm-hmm.
illustrations, right? I'd have people like, you know, there was one time I was saying I did a portraits of, oh, it's something like 40 people
Oh,
and all their staff, and they wanted it kind of like cartoony, like Simpsons style. I'm
okay.
like, okay, I can do that. And um, so I'd end up just doing all kinds of different stuff. Uh, the medical illustration one was funny because when we showed it to I think it was a nursing association or something, it was like complete skeleton, and it showed how fibromyalgia
Mm-hmm.
worked and all this stuff. And we went through the whole thing, and then she's like, yeah, I'm just not sure if we can use the illustrations. And and I was like, well, why not? Because it was that was my part of this bigger project. And she's like, well, they're professional medical illustrations. We'd have to license them to pay extra for them. I was like, no, I drew them myself. like like she's like, you drew those by hand? Yeah, I drew those by hand. Oh, I was like, you own those. You paid for them. Oh, so so that was weird. So it's like, okay, I guess I could have gone into medical illustration. Um, but yeah, freelance stuff, fitting it in and juggling it uh, is always, you know, like the thing you gotta see if you can do. Most people who hit me up are pretty good because I sort of say, you know, I've been swamped
Mm-hmm.
doing my own stuff, but they'll be like, oh, I'm in no huge rush, and I'm like, okay, so I just try to fit them in and do what I can. Um, but yeah, it's that. I don't know. I always wonder if I answer
No,
questions
no, yeah.
right.
So unexpected aspect says can't wait for Rudiger's, and we'll get to that in 1 second.
Hmm.
Stephen Whitaker asks, has being a successful professional artist taken any of the joy out of creating art? Is it still fun?
Yeah, yeah. Yep. That's that was something I kind of dealt with early on. Um, that sort of thing, like like when your hobby and the thing you love turns into a career, right? Like,
Yeah.
does it kind of ruin it, or could it ruin it? But I found like I just found this sweet spot, like I said, where it's like there's stuff I like to do. Um, I just made a bunch of stuff for people and said, "What do you think of this?" And they're like, "That's kind of cool." And then we put it out, and people were like, "I really like that." And we're like, "Okay, this is good." So I think when that can get hard, like I said, is when you like in college. I shouldn't be saying like and all that so much, but anyway, in college, I had an offer from Disney. I'd
Hmm.
gone through and I'd spent like all this time teaching myself classical animation techniques, um, and they had offered me a possible in between
Hmm.
animator position, which is sort of like the very like grunt,
The bottom rung.
like the bottom rung, but that's okay because I was like just out of college. But I kind of was like, ugh, like that I don't think that's what I want to do, right? So I think it depends on what you're doing. If like you may love Frank Frazetta and all this
Mhm.
kind of stuff and end up where you're like drawing My Little Ponies all day, and you'd be like, oh my god, right, and just hate it. But I think if you like drawing My Little Ponies and somebody hires you to draw My Little Ponies, you're all good.
Well, as a guy who grew up loving Dungeons and Dragons and playing tabletop role playing games,
Mhm.
it
Yep.
seems like the Magic the Gathering and later D&D was, really fit to your specific taste. Would you say that
Mhm.
for people who want to become artists, that they should sort of like figure out in general what they want to do, and maybe you got to pay the bills, take the My Little Pony stuff, as it
Yep.
comes, but at least with your own portfolio, keep trying to push into the area you want to get into, so that eventually you will
Yep.
be recognized, if not an expert, at least talented in that area, so people will give you money for the things that you want to do.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, like it's sort of it's sometimes they're related to music, just so maybe it makes more
Hmm.
sense to people. Um, but let's say I was going to conventions for Wizards of the Coast, doing portfolio reviews for Magic the Gathering or D&D, right? Um, so we'll compare that to like, um, I'm going to a convention. I'm looking for country music
Hmm.
musicians, right? And somebody comes up to me and has their sample music, and it's all hard rock,
Yeah.
right? But it's really good, right? And you're kind of like you like that's the critique kind of thing where it's like I'm not actually critiquing you. This is really good. I just can't use it because I run a country music festival,
Yep.
right? So then I found at those conventions I was often giving people that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
right? Because you might have people who like their work is really like kids books, and it looks like kids books kind of work, and I'd be like, do you want to do kids books? And sure enough, they'd be like, I've always wanted to do kids books. And I was like, okay, here's how you hit kids books publishers. Like, here's how you want to look, who you want to look into, how you can find them, how to connect with them. Here's how you can sort your portfolio for that. Um, yeah, but that's definitely that, I guess style, genre, like whatever you like, you will be into. And the more you're into it, the sort of more finesse
Hmm.
you have in that area. But I think sometimes folks are like, it would be good to do that. Like, it'd be cool to do that. And it's like, okay, do you do anything like that? No, I always do this. And it's like, you should maybe do the other thing, right? Or build a portfolio for
Hmm. Like just a
this other
separate one.
thing. Yep. Yep. I've totally seen people with completely different portfolios for different jobs. Yep. Yep. And there was an artist I met once at a convention, and this is another goes totally against what I just said, but um, he was still in his last year of college, um, and he had this amazing portfolio, but it was all like sort of like very modern warfare or
Hmm.
sci-fi, kind of stuff. And I was like, none of this is fantasy, right? But he was super talented, so I was like, you gotta do just like, can you do like a piece or two of fantasy? Like, show me you can do something fantasy. And he was like, okay, I'll try. And he went back and he had his final
Hmm.
practicum, and he was like, my teacher said I can spend my last, semester, couple semesters, whatever it was, doing some fantasy stuff. Will you be my whatever it is,
Hmm.
mentor or
Ooh,
whatever it is? And I was like, oh, awesome. So I was like, absolutely, I will do that. So yeah, he spent that last part of his practicum doing
nice.
that, and he made great stuff. And now he's been doing magic cards ever since.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
So yep. So you can do it, but like I said, I guess the point of it would be like what you're showing in a portfolio or whatever you want to do. You got to show them that you're like, I'm doing what you're looking for.
Yeah,
It's the big deal.
that's
Yeah.
the thing. Yeah, there was a post today about by a guy who wants to he's publishing comics, right? And he's an author, and he posted on Twitter
Yeah.
about looking for artists on Twitter. I was like, oh God, no. Because what happens is like, there are legitimate people, but then it's like, if he posts like, okay, I want something that looks like John Burns circa 1982, and then you get people with like furry comics, like, and they're not
Yep.
even well done, and they're like, here, I'll do your comic for $20 a page, and it's like, ooh,
Yeah.
um,
Well, we had that too on Magic. Like, you could even to speak of the comic thing. Um, we had this idea where it's like we'll do like Magic comics, right? And we thought,
mhm.
well, yeah, and it's like we have this pool of artists, right, who are all super talented. Um, and then also the art director at the time, he's like, they can paint the comics, like they would have
Okay.
book digital paint or whatever. And it was like, okay, and I was sort of like, ooh, like I'm not sure, you know, because they're very different
Different
discipline.
in
Comic
different
artists,
mediums.
different mediums, and comic artists are like
Hmm.
fast and they're expressing from panel to panel. They're dealing with layout, like they're telling a story through all these panels. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, even laying out panels on a page. Um, so we did it, right, and most of the artists were only doing, I think there were maybe like six-page stories or something like that. But like I said, a lot of them were illustrators, like traditional illustrators or digital illustrators. And by the end of that, I remember I just took a sweep as after, and I was like, would you ever do another comic? And they're like, no. Never. It's like
Yep.
that was like the hardest thing I've ever done. And then I also decided to paint it. Um, so yeah, it's just sometimes it's medium. Um, I've I've done a few comics, but they're not easy, right? And I draw pretty fast and all that, but oof, they're tough.
Yeah, a lot of people think art is art, and everything is the same, but like there's different parts of your brain that you got to use, and if you're constantly doing one kind, and then you try to switch over to the other,
Yep.
it's like when you were a kid and you haven't played baseball all winter, and then you go back out in the spring and you're all sore for a while.
Yep. Yeah. For comic stuff or on D&D, there was a point where I brought Max Dunbar
Hmm.
in. And if you've ever seen
Oh yeah.
Max's work, it's awesome. Love Max's stuff. And um, he was he was a little intimidated at the time because I was like, I forget who the team was. I think it was Alexi Briclo. And I was like, yeah, Max, this is Alexi. He's worked on the Marvel movies. He's done concepts for the Marvel movies and this stuff. And this is Darkin. He's done stuff for most giant video games you've ever heard of and all this. And Max was like, I'm not sure if we do this. I was like, dude, you can totally do this. You are awesome. And I'm not a dummy. Like I picked you because so it's like, are you saying I'm a dummy? No. I was like, well, I picked you because you're talented. So I kind of pulled that little thing on him. But Max too, like I said, there's like Max could go through and just give you a palette of characters or like designs and like we have artists who kind of illustrate more. They might get textures and painterly colors and things like that more. One of the reasons I brought Max in was he was more like myself, where it's like draw it, like show it and then turn it around. Give me a side view, give me a back view if you want it. Like, so that to me was, like you said, everybody's got their different talents. Not everybody on the football team is a linebacker. Like you need the quarterback, you need this, or hockey team, like you get your forwards, your defense, your goalie. There's all different people. So yeah, on the concept pushes, that's what I used to do, is just try to bring in different people to feel stuff out, and then before you knew it, they're all working together. But you definitely knowing what you're into probably influences what you end up drawing and making. And that's probably your best thing to pursue. And then also knowing what you're good at. And like a comic book, for example, just try to make one. And you quickly learn, it's like, wow, this is tough. But then somebody like Max is why I brought him up. You can throw him a comic book and he's like, here's your comic book. It's just, and it's awesome. Like crazy.
So we mentioned earlier, you are working on your own game, free of the shackles, free to be whatever you like. Rudiger's.
Yep.
So first of all, my first question is since you don't have oversight, there's no CEO giving you timelines, there's no overall director or whatnot, does that make it easier or harder or somewhere in between when you're working on your own?
It was yeah, that's a lot. Like definitely directionally, it was like kind of easier. The fact that I know I've had a friend or two of mine a friend or two of mine who've been helping me on it, who have kind of been like probably wanted to choke me periodically. Just kind of, oh, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. Yeah. So yeah, I would say there's generally it's cool because you sort of figure out what your vision is. And I was very much used to, trying to nab somebody else's vision or try to figure out what audience they were trying to get, and this was much more like, this is me and my friends, making a thing and what would we do, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's, that's sort of like the freelance versus working in-house question. Definitely with both of those situations, when I'm working for someone, it's a hell of a lot easier to, go home at the end of the day and be like, I'm going to play Skyrim for 4 hours. But or Red Dead Redemption 2. But when it's just you, it's harder to sort of go, I'll put that down. No, I'm not going to put that down. You know, like, yeah. So that can be tricky.
Definitely. So let's see here if this works. Yeah, there we go. So we've got your Instagram here. We've got some what would you call concept art? That's the word I'm looking for.
Oh, these are just doodles.
Well, it's concepty. Concept of a concept. Yeah. So first of all, where is it? Where are you in the process? How's it going?
Oh.
And give us a little bit about like what's the I'm guessing medievalish fantasy, but what's the flavor of the game?
Yep. Well, first I'll start with kind of where we're at. So we're actually starting into layout now. And I don't know if I mentioned before, but I partnered with Runehammer Games. And he's sort of publishing, he's helping with the layout and all that stuff. So we jam back and forth on that stuff. It feels like, you know, now we're entering into it. You know what I mean? It's underway. You know, like there's a chunk of it that's being, you know, put together. In terms of I break up what we were aiming for, and this took a while to kind of come to, and there was a little off-road sidebar thing too, but I'll go through that too. But as far as the I would say like the book inspiration, if you're talking about tabletop role-playing books, I realized at a certain point what I was envisioning and what was coming out too was almost like a mixture between the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, which was basically, I just call it like a toolbox and a toy box type of thing, where it's like there's a lot of stuff in here, and it's just fun. It gives you ideas. There's little widgets and things you can use in your games. So I was like, okay, there's a big component of that. And then the other book that I think was really hitting close to what we were kind of doing too was the D&D Rules Cyclopedia, because that was a very complete book. Like it was like, here's your races, here's your classes, here's your spells, here's your monsters, here's a setting, here's this, here's that, right? So I was like, okay, we're kind of doing that too. So we're like, toolbox, toy box was sort of where we're going. We're still working on like an OSR, you know, compatible kind of stuff. Putting in things like a monster builder that'll work for any of those games. And we have our own game with some twists. And then the mechanics we put in that were our twists that we wanted to make, we're focused on, like, I guess, sort of our narrative or inspirations or whatever. And that was definitely the top of the list, was like Fritz Lieber's Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, right? Because to me that always felt the most like our D&D games, you know. And I was like, this is really what our kind of setting is. Also a lot of like Robert E. Howard stuff. There's some H.P. Lovecraft stuff in there. So I'd say the big leader is like, it's very Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser influenced. But in general, just like more pulp fantasy. That's sort of the stuff we grew up with. So we're like, this really is what we feel like it is.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And some of the old books, I should say too, like Lone Wolf, Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yes.
Books, you know.
Oh, you remember those?
Yep. Oh yeah, I loved them. So those are big influences.
Oh yeah. I was trying to find Gary Chalk to see if he could do some work for my stuff, but he's hard to get a hold of.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen him on Twitter.
He is, but he doesn't follow me, and I believe his messages weren't open. And I think I contacted his representation, and like I never heard anything. So maybe for the sequel.
Maybe so. His work is wonderful. Love Gary Chalk.
It's really classic. It's a shame, we won't be getting any more of that classic lone wolf stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for the game itself,
mm-hmm.
I've been noticing different trends in games, and one of them is for shorter and shorter campaigns. Like there's Matt Colville's what's it called Draw Steel. A friend of mine is really into that, and apparently Draw Steel is their campaigns only go like 6 levels. I shouldn't say you only go 6 level. It goes up to level 10.
Yeah.
That's the max. And the goal is for you to level in general once per session. So you're talking like 2.5, 3 months of play, for a campaign. Are you noticing or incorporating design trends like that, or are you sort of on the let it go as long as it goes bandwagon?
A little bit of both. Like we do have sort of I guess what you call like a soft cap at 10th level. And that's really a cap. We do stuff like you don't keep getting hit points. Like we'll stop you there. And you don't like your saving throw will kind of be like, we have like a static saving throw. You start with 15 and you go down by 1 every other level. So your saving throw will only get so easy, and then it stops, right? But we also have just like there's basically, without going too into it, there's sort of a resource you can get, which is either like grit or mana, and they're just d6s that you can get each level. And if you go past 10th, you can keep getting those. So, and also like we have it like 10th level, but it's more like, we'd see it more as like 3, 4, maybe 5 games between levels, kind of thing. So, and a lot of this stuff too is, there's a lot of things that you could adjust if you really wanted to. But when we made it, we kind of fashioned it after how our games played when we were younger, and sort of going, this sort of feels right. But yeah, we would like this to have it's definitely a level at every session would be odd in the system we have.
But it is an interesting trend that well, we both know the Dungeon Delver. I mean, that guy's been playing virtually the same game for like the last 40 years. So it's interesting to think that at least with modern audiences, they want a definite ending, and they don't necessarily want to go 15 years before they find that ending.
And there's that gets into the other thing too, like those two things. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it definitely makes the design goal really hard. If you have a goal where I can keep leveling, or I can go really high, like 30th level, but I also want high level to be fun, and I want it to be engaging, because you're going way out there, and then sort of going, okay, will this be fun, or will I have a dragon that has 10,957 hit points and does 872 damage per round, and all that kind of stuff? And then you realize, oh, when this math starts getting into 3 digits, it's sort of more fiddly than I care to deal with. Um, and yeah, and it's like saving throws don't matter anymore because they're all
Yeah.
2 or something like that. So it begins, and then you do design around it where it's like, oh, this creature has a saving throw. It also has magic resistance and that. So to me, it's sort of like I kind of like the idea that if you're going to have some high level game, that you do feel like that's what we kind of capped ours at 10, but you keep going, but you aren't blowing your character off the scale.
Yeah.
Things are still a challenge that are out there, and you can still have some high level games and have it be relatively fun.
I would say at least like within the last 10 years, because we're at the 11th year of 5e. Like that has been one of the issues for pretty much all the systems. Like the characters are basically, if they're not gods themselves, they're demigods by the time they're hitting that cap. So it does make it harder for game designers, and I think especially for the average person at home doing homebrew, like there's only so much you can do. But
yeah, and and a lot of times too the numbers can get really high. I remember playing a sort of high level game of 4th edition. This is when I was still at Wizards. And it was sort of like just roughly estimating, it was something like I had like plus 40 to hit or something like that, and the enemy had like a 50 armor class, and I rolled a d20, and I was sort of like, okay, well, it's got a 10 armor class then. Like it's sort of like there's this additional math to make your whatever that good feeling thing is in your brain, your whatever, your endorphins or whatever, to trigger these things. I mean, I have plus 40 or something, but really it's sort of like it's like rolling to hit a 10. You need a 10 or better, right? So I used to find that kind of stuff like this is great, but if it goes too far, it's kind of like sort of unnecessary for the fun. So we tried to make it so it's like, okay, if you get above here, we'll give you these extra things you can still allow you to smash and blast and do all that a little more effectively, but they're not like game breaky.
So when do you think we're gonna start seeing a little more? When can we expect like test groups and release announcements?
It's I've always been a little bit cautious to say that because I have like Runehammer's partnering it with me, partnering in on it with me and helping me. Like I said, he's working on layout now, and we're kind of chunking back and forth and sort of talking about, we like this, we like that. So I will tell you what I would like to do, and hopefully like in the next let's say month or so, I would love it. I would love to grab some folks and give them like a playtest copy.
Nice.
And just see how they. It wouldn't be the complete everything, and it probably won't be as pretty as the final thing. Probably just be like sort of a Word doc, PDF, whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't mind opening it up for a little more playtest. Like I said, a lot of it's like OSR compatible, so I think there's a lot of parts of it that are pretty familiar, and we've tried to say, here are the fun new things you can do.
Nice.
Yeah. So like this gives you a little more flexibility. Like I said, we have sort of a couple of resources that you can throw into rolls and throw into stuff to make that a little more dynamic. There's two things, I think, and this is one of the things we were fiddling with, and this will get really like tabletop game geeky if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Okay. So to me, in my mind anyway, and I think a lot of people pointed this out too, you have your paladin and he's 10th level or 20th level, let's say 20th level, and he's got 150 hit points, and he has plus 10 to hit and plus 10 damage, right? And then he goes through a big fight, and then near the end of that fight, he's got 7 hit points, and he still has plus 10 to hit and does plus 10 damage, and that kind of thing. And that was one of the, we're in looking at like the source material we really liked. Conan, for example, like really kicked ass, but then fell down to his knees and was like,
Yeah.
Like, or if you were casting a spell, like you could cast spells, but it was like draining you and things like that. So we worked that into a few things. Like we said, we have these resources where it's like, yep, you can throw these dice into damage, or you can use them to recover hit points to be like Conan coming back, or you can throw them into spells like lightning bolting someone. So then it's like hit points, and we also have this expendable resource. And then the other thing to me that doesn't help, but it's like our idea of like bringing that idea into the game a bit more is spell casting. There's no like spell levels. You don't have to track whether a spell is used or not. You basically can just cast spells until you pass out. Like you basically keep casting, and as you keep casting, depending on like you roll sort of a save to see if you get fatigue, and as you build fatigue, you actually might get exhausted just from casting.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's really not like I have 3 first level spells and 2 second level spells and 1 third level spell. It's more like I'm just casting, and then I may actually be so exhausted that I can't cast anymore. But even as I'm going, I'm getting fatigued during the combat. And the other thing we added in, similar for like the more rogue fighter types, were like sort of that type of fatigue for like trying to pull crazy maneuvers off in combat. So we liked that because we're like, okay, now we have hit points, but you also have like a resource that you can use for other things that you'll drain when you fight, and you'll also have fatigue that you build up as you fight. So it's, to us, it's sort of like, this feels more like Conan or Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse or this or that. And it also really makes the spell system a lot simpler. Like, it's just like, have fun casting, try not to pass out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now that I think about it, that is something that's kind of missing, at least from most modern games. Is like you could just use all your abilities willy-nilly, but it does seem like there should be, like, it seems like Constitution should be used for that as well, where it's like, can you actually physically do this?
Yep. Yeah, we kind of have it where the definitive thing, as you gain a bit of fatigue, it only goes up to at 5 fatigue. Like I said, I won't go into too many details about it. That's when you're kind of exhausted. You actually make a Constitution save to make sure you can stay conscious, kind of thing, because you might just pass out from overtaxing yourself. But like we said, we thought that kind of modeled the stories we liked, but it also gives this kind of like the enemy is wearing you down, or I'm wearing myself down because I'm trying to push it. I'm trying to push more to do something. And I think it helps a little bit too. Like it's sort of a bit more of a built-in system. So when a player says, can I try something? You can be like, yep, like give me a roll. If it goes bad, you might get a fatigue. So it gives you, because a lot of times it's hard to figure out if you're DMing, like what's my trade-off here? Like I need to give them a positive or a negative. I need to give them a difficulty of this, that. So we thought that for DMs, it might actually build in a little bit more of a risk factor and kind of be like, if you want to try something, there's also a risk to it. So it makes it easier to say, yeah, give it a try. Just don't screw up. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a couple questions in the audience. Where was that? I was just looking at. Oh, here we go. Chubby Funster wants to know, what's your favorite monster concept?
And Zvart is my avatar on Twitter. If he's talking about of ones I've done, I sort of have some like for D&D. See, I'm still doing it. I haven't been talking on D&D. I get to kind of redesign most of the demon lords.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely my favorite stuff to concept, and Demogorgon was my favorite thing to reconcept, and just give it that, because that was one of those creatures when we were in high school and you flip to the old original drawing of Demogorgon. It was like in my imagination this horrible creature and all this, and I was like, I gotta try to draw this. And it kind of made all those demon lords like very messy. They were supposed to just be the concept art as well, but they ended up putting them in the book, like Out of the Abyss and stuff. So they're like, we'll just use these, and I was like, okay, if you wanna, right? But I was super into those, and I was like working late. Like I had people I worked with. They're like, you can go home. It's like I gotta finish this demon. On Magic, I would say it was the Phyrexian Praetors. Like they're sort of the Phyrexians are sort of like organic evil machiney things, and yeah, I got to do all the Praetors for those sort of each color, like blue, black, green, all that. So for Magic, I think those are my favorite ones to do because they were so weird that I basically could just draw crazy stuff and show it to the art director and the team and go like, what do you think of this? And they're like, that's weird. Yeah, that, But they're also the ones I think that a lot of people are like, they recognize them. So especially the Praetors, I think, because that was something, Phyrexia existed, but those characters and ideas didn't for those particular Praetors. So when a lot of people like something you make, and you get to make something for like a big brand like that, it's kind of cool. Like it's a little sliver of how it might have felt for somebody to make Batman or Superman or something. It's like you made something that a lot of people love and they think is neat. And I still get messages about those concepts where people are like, what were you thinking? And what was your idea? What was your big idea? I was like, I was just drawing crazy ideas.
I think I was hungry at the time.
Oh, there's a bunch. Yeah, there could be anything. I was watching Lilo and Stitch.
So Patty's Parlor asks, have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? If so, was there a point you got over it, like a eureka moment?
Oh, hell yes. Yeah. That was especially when I first got to Wizards. It's just like a guy from Canada they're like, you are now the in-house concept artist, yada yada. And they're also like, and at that time too, I was a little older. I was in my 30s when I started at Wizards, I guess. And like I said, I'd done illustration, this and that before, but to be a person who's into fantasy art and suddenly be thrown into working with or meeting like a lot of people, like Todd Lockwood or Brahms in the building today and all that. If you weren't intimidated, you maybe have like a lobotomy thing in your head, like because you're surrounded by these super talented people, who are, you're just like, wow, like this is amazing. Like it's like you're like, I play guitar, and then it's like, cool, you're gonna be playing guitar with Jimi Hendrix. It's like, yeah. But I had my very first concept push. There were especially two folks, Wayne Reynolds and Brian Chippy Dugan. They were there, and I always credit them for sort of getting me through that first push and being scared shitless. And, yeah, because they were there. They're like, yep, here's how this goes, here's how that goes, this, that. And weirdly enough, that's something I took into later concept art pushes when we would bring artists in, and I would see an artist who was like, say, newer or younger, or they'd be nervous. And I would just explain to them, it's like, I'm going to tell you about how I started here. And they're like, yeah, but you're the veteran, man. And I'm like, no, let me tell you. Let me tell you my first time front line as a Roman soldier with my little shield and spear running at somebody, right? So I think too, you might eventually get over imposter syndrome. Maybe, like I think I could be over it. I don't know. Maybe somebody could. I think I'm too old to care now. But the other part is, the other engine that I think you have for that stuff is like self-critique. So when it's commonly you do a drawing and then you say the next day, you're like, this is crap. Right? And then you're like, I'm going to try that again, or I'm going to try this a different way, or I think I can do better than that. So I'd say, maybe the imposter syndrome comes and goes. That other part, though, where you're self-critiquing, I think is part of your engine, and you probably should keep it until you fall down dead on the table, because it sort of keeps you trying new stuff and, pushing it. Yeah.
So Patty had another question before we move on a little. You were talking about earlier, working on projects at home. I have a hard time walking away from projects when I probably should. What's your advice?
I'm not good at it either. I just try to, like, like I book in things. I talk to friends of mine, and I'll just be like, yep, I'm gonna just hang out with them. Sometimes I just, run games for people. Basically, I just sort of schedule stuff to, we're gonna watch, like this weekend. I think there's a new. It's probably might be out now. Love, Death, Robots.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, yep,
season 4.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, put that stuff on the schedule. But yeah, I would say I'm not. Yeah, don't look for me for advice on that. I'm terrible that way. I just keep doing. I keep fiddling.
And speaking of terrible powers, so there was a point, I think it was late last year, maybe it was early this year, where people were on Twitter begging Elon Musk to buy Wizards of the Coast. in
Yeah.
order to set the Dungeons and Dragons free.
Yep.
Now let's go into a fantasy world where he did, and he calls you up, Richard.
Uh,
I want you to take over the brand.
uh-huh.
What would you do now? Of course, I'm sure that you still have friends working there, but what if you were put in charge of a property of that magnitude?
Mhm.
What sort of direction do you think you would send it in? Either the whole brand, the company itself, or just the art, or how? What changes would Emperor Whitters make?
Okay. Um, I I have I have thought about this many times before. Um, to me, like like anything else, and you can see this with, let's say, it could be a TV shows or movies or comic books are a good one. Um, they can sometimes tend to drift, especially if they've been around for a while. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then if I was to go to comic books again as an example, when when people started rebooting stuff, let's say like Ultimate Spider-Man or Ultimate
Mm-hmm.
Avengers and things like that, or classic, DC heroes and things like that. I think what they're trying to do is sort of cut back on a lot of this stuff that had grown up over, in some cases 50 years or more, and sort of be like what's the real root and heart of this character or this story or this thing. So that would be my general take, is like there's so much there, I think, that is D&D, that's in the heart of it, that's back in the roots of it. I would love to go back to that and sort of interpret that. um, there was a project that uh, I was working on at Wizards that was exploration of different things. But anyway, we were doing some concept art and things like that for Dragonlance at the time, because they were looking at different media for Dragonlance. And I had people in, and I sort of took them through like this is Dragonlance. Like I'm not going to talk about Dragonlance art until I show you everything Larry Elmore did,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like for
Yeah.
Dragonlance,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
gonna we're gonna go through this. We're gonna he had a certain vibe for it, um, and it was like, okay, so we want to give this a feel. We don't want to lose that feel, but maybe the costuming is updated. Maybe we tweak this a bit, tweak that a bit, but it was all like very careful. And we had popping in and out here and there was like Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss were in
Mm-hmm.
here and there for other things too. And of course, it's like, yeah, they're there, or send them stuff and sort of see like, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? So to me, there's a cool thing you can do there. It's sort of like I was saying with Demogorgon. Like I updated Demogorgon
Mm-hmm.
to make it look and feel like it felt to me when I was a kid, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
um, so to me, I would love to do that to D&D, like go back to its roots, because you get various influences as the years goes on. The influences could be movies. The influences could be a lot of people like anime. The influences
Mm-hmm.
could be this, that, and just strip it back and kind of be like, well, people watch anime because they're into anime, but if
Yeah.
they see D&D, they're probably coming over here to get D&D, not just more anime, right? Like,
Yeah.
do the thing you're doing, right? If you're Nashville, don't slowly morph into jazz because jazz is popular. Just let it be, and then go back to Nashville and make it awesome. Because and maybe there's a little crossover update, like Johnny Cash is singing "Hurt" in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, wow, this is crazy kind of stuff, but cool. Yep.
Well, I wonder too how much of it seems like there to me is as a company, of course, you want to make as much money selling everything to everyone
Mhm.
as possible.
Yep.
But as like a responsible brand owner, like trying to keep it evergreen, it seems
Mhm.
to me like you at some point you have to like make a cut. Like this is not the product we make, and then allow third party developers. Like speaking of anime, there's a company that is making modules of like Studio Ghibli type adventures,
Yep.
which I think is fantastic. I just don't necessarily think that's something Wizard needs to be doing, if you know what I mean.
Hmm. Yep. Um, that's sort of where you get into that. Uh, what's your core kind of
Yeah.
thing. You know, um, and I think myself anyway. When I look at like editions and versions of D&D over the years,
Hmm.
um, I think it often there's many reasons that they've gone through cycles of up and
Yeah.
down, but it is typically like up and down, right? Um, and I feel like there is a bit of a trend where you get this. Here's this edition, and you obviously start with the edition like basic or AD&D. This is D&D, so it's
Hmm.
not really. It is what it is, right? Um, and you get kind of like, well, this is what it is. Then my instinct is to push it to be different, and then you can push it to be very different, and depending on how far you push it, people actually are kind of like, yeah, just doesn't feel like
Yeah.
D&D anymore. And then you get an edition where people go, let's go back to the heart of it, right? And then people are like, oh, I love this. You go, you go back to the heart of it, and then it's like, okay, well, we went back to the heart of it. Let's push it in a different direction. And
Yeah.
it's like everybody leaves, and you're like, let's go back to the heart of it. Everybody comes back, right? So I think there's many factors that go into that, but I would say like you said, if I was running the brand, it would be like, yeah, keep it at the heart of it. Um, if there are other things, like if there were other things you could explore, then that's cool. Like I would love to. I think Sarah Frazetta, who's like Frank Frazetta's
Hmm.
granddaughter, I believe.
Yep.
Um, like she still has ownership and rights, I think, to things like Death Dealer and Fire and
Hmm.
Ice from Frazetta's estate. Partnering with her on D&D and going like, we're gonna do Death Dealer, Fire and Ice, um, and we'll tweak rules to make it feel more like that.
Like that world. Yeah.
Yep. So I could see that, but again, that's not your core. That's not like playing D&D. That's like this is a separate thing. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. I mean, like that makes a lot of sense to me too. 2E is like the edition that no one remembers is the best.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like expansion packs, the Forgotten Realms is basically de facto D&D now.
Yeah.
That's become the default. Um, you had like Spelljammers was out then, and oh my god, Dark Sun. That's the one I'm thinking of.
Dark Sun,
Uh,
Planescape. Yeah.
yeah, which, they all had their own following. They all had unique settings that were slightly different from the other. It seems like maybe kind of sort of to an extent during the 5e period they were trying that, but it was more like they had so many things that they wanted to do. Like the only one I could really think of is like the Strahd universe, the Ravenloft universe. They
Mm-hmm.
came out with Curse of Strahd, and then what seemed like too many years later, they came out with the second one, which I'm totally blanking on, which was
Yes.
more
Van Richten's Guide.
yes,
I think. Yep.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like stuff like that would be should you not take like 5 years to to put out that second one, it
Yep.
seems like that would be more of a of a strategy. But I'm kind of
Yep.
curious too. Were you the CEO of Wizards of the Coast?
Hmm.
Would you also spend time focusing on other games? Because TSR had a ton of tabletop role playing games
Hmm.
that, I mean, I guess kind of sort of they're around in some fashion, but
Yep.
I don't really see Wizards doing a whole lot with them.
Well, I I know something that we're thinking of doing,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe other people will pick up with this and do this too. But I was I was talking to my friends about games and us playing like back in college, back in high school, all through the years. Um, and there was a thing, especially back in high school and college, like we played D&D 90% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we'd play like a few games of Call of Cthulhu. Um, and we would try out some GURPS and riffs, and MERPs, you know,
Mm-hmm.
MERP, uh, and all that. So we would try different games. Um, but what I found was like we were pretty much playing D&D, and then we would try these other games kind of between our D&D campaigns, or when people didn't show up, or this or that. So I always thought I think it would be cool to make games more for that kind of like short run. Doesn't need to be a whole campaign,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
like like less bulky games. Like go kind of the opposite of Pathfinder's for the people who like a lot of detail, right?
A lot of math. Yeah.
A lot of math, a lot of detail. Most of the people I know who really like Pathfinder, they're like engineers, physicists, that kind of thing. Um, so not poo pooing them at all, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's the type of game they like. And I think there's like a niche in there for these games where it's like, oh, we had two players didn't show up. Let's pull out this game. There was a little Quicksilver game, I called it, of Star Wars I put out on
Mm-hmm.
May the 4th. And I just stuck it out there, and I had so many people. They're just like, "Can I get the PDF?" And I'm like, "Sure." So I was emailing PDFs most of that for the next 2 or 3 days. But it's a really simple, quick system, and I thought, if there were other games like that, I think I would I would do like these sort of like quick start, quick play versions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had a lot of people that really liked it, maybe you take it to like a full game.
Yeah, we had earlier old school wargamer. He
Hmm.
left a comment. I'm taking your Star Wars rules to the library to teach some noobs to RPG. Thanks, Richard.
Woohoo! Awesome. Great.
So I have a question too. So Cyrus mentions Gamma World.
Yeah.
So I play in the Dungeon Delvers Friday night Gamma World sessions,
Yeah.
and one thing that I learned that I didn't realize is when Jim Ward originally wrote it, he wrote it in a way that it's supposed to be easy to, like, you could take your Gamma World characters and throw them into D&D, or you could take D&D characters or monsters and bring them into Gamma World.
Uh-huh.
Do you think something like that, where Wizards has these properties and they're all fairly different, if they came out with like a line where it was easy to take a character from one to the other, um, do you think that would be something, like you're saying, like if people already kind of sort of knew the game a little bit, would it be easy to jump off into these other properties?
I I think so. Like to me, that's a big long thing. But when I see a lot of people picking up Shadowdark and just playing it,
Hmm.
um, I think it's because it's got this foundation in what I call like the lingua franca
Yeah.
of like tabletop games. It's like because D&D was the first. Every other game was sort of a iteration or a variant off of what D&D was doing. One might argue, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's absolutely true or not, um, but there is this sort of foundation, and if you're designing anything, familiarity is a huge tool that you
Hmm.
can leverage, right? Um, so if I was making a time control machine, I would probably use all the buttons from the old VCR: stop, pause, rewind, right? So like,
Yeah.
it's like, I get it. It's very simple. Um, so yeah, I think uh, there is a level to that. When you look at, say, stuff that Sandy Peterson did in Call of Cthulhu, it has a lot of, I would say, fundamental, that lingua franca of D&D stuff,
Hmm.
because you do have hit points. You are rolling to do things like skills. You kind of have a class. It's more of a profession, that kind of thing. So that original Cthulhu game. But the way the game was tweaked, where it's like, you these creatures will kill you. You don't go try to stab it to death, right? And
Yeah.
it's more about the mystery and the sanity mechanic and things like that. So I think there's a lot you can do with, like, maintaining that mechanical part, as you kind of get this part, but are there other things that I can add on to it that change the feel and the play of the game, that make it interesting? um, so that's where my head goes when you ask that question. I don't know if it hits what you were getting at. I do like
No, yeah.
compatible systems, but it risks you getting into
Too much
ev-
sameness.
too much same. Yeah, you don't kind of redesign, like Cthulhu. When I say it's got some D&D-ish stuff, it's very fundamental, but the entire game is redesigned to have a certain effect, right? And it's hard to
Yeah, yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one small indie publisher called Shades of Vengeance out of the
Hmm.
UK, and like he's got a game for virtually every genre out there,
Yep.
and many of them you can play. Like he's got one which is like a sci-fi space adventure, but then he's got another one which is like sci-fi ship combat,
Yep.
and so they can work together. And then there's like he's got medieval high fantasy, medieval low fantasy, and then you've got like post-apocalyptic stuff and like zombie world, and all of that stuff can really work together,
Yep.
which seemed like a neat idea to me. But other than I forget the guy's name, I'm blanking on the one who did Stars Without Numbers and like everything without numbers.
Oh yes.
um,
Jeremy. No. Oh, now I forget.
hmm,
I'm sorry. But
um,
that was actually that little Star Wars game I put out. Um, that was sort of that was the basic core of a system that I would
mhm.
use. Like, sometimes I'd have people visit Wizards and they'd be like, "Hey, like they get there on like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday or something. They're like, "Hey, could you run a game for us this weekend?" And sometimes I'd just say, "Well, what do you want to play?" And they'd be like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I'd be like, "Well, I don't know. Do you want, like, sci-fi, Wild West? Like, um, this, I just ask them what, what kind of thing they would do, and then I would just kind of fudge up rules, use that base system to kind of build some rules around what we wanted to play, and then by the weekend we'd just play. And it usually took me like an evening to make a little game,
Mhm.
because it's a very simple system. Um, so that to me is actually very fun. Now that system doesn't try to model a lot of stuff. I would just throw in a mechanic or two that's different. Um, but yeah, that I did several versions of that. One of them was like sort of like gothic horror-y. I did the Star Wars one. We had fiddled with some like just weird Wild West kind of stuff, and uh, a whole bunch. We almost did one that was kind of like a Scooby Doo. It was more like 80s.
Mhm.
Like you might be goth or a jock or and you're on like some sort of field trip. Um, so it's like, well, we have this basis of a system, and I just build in components that we can play, so you can kind of play whatever you want. Um, so I do like that idea. I like the idea where it's like you have some really basic mechanics, and that's not the part you worry about.
Mm-hmm.
The part that you're thinking about is like, what's the theme? How do I make it, like that theme? How do I
Yeah,
make things
yeah,
happen? Yep.
yeah. I've got a saying: "Feels above everything."
Yeah.
Um, which before people accuse me of having blue hair and a nose ring, I mean, whatever kind of game you want to make or
Hmm.
play, like everything has to go towards that theme,
Yeah.
including the rules.
Yep.
And then later it's the writing and then the art and all that kind of stuff. But um, a horror game should feel like a horror game. There should be some level of disgust and pressure and dread involved in it, or maybe it's not working.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. And there's all kinds of like sub genres to things and different themes and different vibes to it. Because sci-fi, for example, is like a huge genre. You can
Oh
have
yeah.
sci-fi horror. Um, Warhammer 40K is like, whatever you call it, like medieval gothic sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
in some aspects. Um, there's like old sort of like Sword and Planet sci-fi, uh, like Princess of Mars, and then there's sort of the rocket ship sci-fi, like old Flash Gordon comics and stuff. But they all have all of these different things. They feel different. And if I went back to Warhammer 40K, my friend and I were talking about this past few days. Warhammer 40K is some of the best like world building flavor text uh, of any game, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they do amazing. Like their names and the ideas they came up with, and this giant spanning, you know, canon of what they have. Yeah.
Yep. So Cyrus says the art is what gets your attention. Definitely, you need fantastic art that's on point for the right feels for the game. But I would
Yep.
say it's the rules that keeps people playing your game for 50 years.
Yes. Yep.
If you get that feels right, you're. I mean, even Call of Cthulhu. Call of
Yep.
Cthulhu. What it was late 70s, I think.
Yep.
Um, and it still plays exactly like it should.
Yeah. Yep. I used to. Yeah, that goes back to something I used to. Let's say I used to gripe in meetings sometimes. Um, um, but we'd be talking about, let's say, a certain project, and I'd be like, okay, we got to make sure we don't make the mistake, the big mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what's the big mistake? And it's like, it sounds like you want to make a really good gourmet hot dog, but so far your packaging says chocolate cupcake, right? And if your cover of your book says chocolate cupcake and people buy it and it turns out to be a gourmet hot dog, it doesn't matter how good your hot dog is because they were expecting a friggin' cupcake. And now they're like, "Ugh." They're just mad at you for not, paying off what you do. So that to me, like you're saying, with the flavor of it, or with the themes, I
Mm-hmm.
guess you could say, and things like that, like that works all the way down from the artwork to the mechanics to the write-ups, the narrative write-ups that you do in it, even the graphic design, you know um I, I guess I'd say you always try your best to like
Yeah.
sort of incorporate everything in, um but yeah, the post I had the other day where I was going through saying this is the art style I would use, or this is an artist and this is the type of game I would put it with.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is a super fun,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
game to play. Yeah. Yep.
Let's see. I thought I saw one more question here
Mhm.
that I can't. Oh, by the way, that was Kevin Crawford.
Kevin
Uh,
Crawford.
let's see.
See,
Oh,
I was thinking Jeremy Crawford.
yeah, me too. And I was like, oh, it doesn't seem like Jeremy Crawford, but
Yeah.
um,
No, I knew the Crawford part, and I was like, it's not. So I was like, it's either Jeremy something or it's something Crawford.
So Patty also wants to know: have you ever played a war game?
Yeah. Like I've played I've played a little bit of Warhammer 40K. We used to just make our own. We had this. That was another college thing. We had because we knew obviously about Warhammer 40K. 40K. At that time, you could actually get StarCraft on your Commodore 64 or whatever the hell we had at the time,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. It wasn't that bad, but probably just a PC. But yeah, I like war games. They're a totally different experience. Um, I still end up, like when that one goblin, like I'm still like 1 foot in role playing when I do them. Yeah, but I remember in college I had found these little like plastic knights and monsters and stuff, kind of like plastic army soldiers, but they're like knights and monsters. And I was always picking up stuff like that because I like making board games and other games, and even just finding things I could use as minis for D&D. So we decided we're going to make this war game, and we ended up having these epic battles in our living room where it's
Awesome.
like it takes you this long to climb up the couch, and then you're gonna fight up here, and this is this, and so yeah, we would even make our own little war games. But yeah, I
Very
would
cool.
say at that time too, though it's real time strategy was coming in at that point too, like I said, like StarCraft and stuff like that. So we did I probably did more of that on the computer wargaming type stuff.
Yeah. So one last question before we finish it up.
Yeah.
We had a pretty good run
Mm-hmm.
with from, let's say, 2014 until this year.
Yeah.
We saw a resurgence of tabletop gaming, especially with 5e, with the rise of live play on YouTube's. Um, do you see that continuing, or do you think it's all going to be eventually be replaced um, with video games? I would say, for a while, it looked like video games were like, especially Japanese RPGs and whatnot, were a bit more popular. But then, sort of with the 5e and COVID and all that good stuff,
Yeah.
real gaming came in. Do you think we're going to see uh, real gaming with actual people come back more?
I that could be on two fronts. It's like I hope so. I because I think there is that kind of thing. Even if it just sort of like to me, COVID forced it to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I ended up with that. Like even when I moved to Seattle, I have a lot of buddies all around different parts of the world, and wherever. So if I wanted to hang out and play a game, I could just log into some VTT or something and play with them more easily that way. So, but COVID was definitely, it's like you can't get together, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a different experience, and I can't predict the future or anything, but I think that would be really cool if people were more like, no, I think I want to hang out with some humans, like, because I think we've
I
been inundated with social media, all this kind of stuff, and like which breaks first? Do people take gaming more into that realm, or do people kind of go like, I need something besides social media to feel like a human, you know? So I think they're push pull. I don't know which way it goes, but I do hope more people hang out with just friends and laugh and be goofs. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I think to some extent people are looking for a palate cleanse.
Mhm.
for their work lives, which have become very online based.
Yep.
And it is nice to hang out with people, and not to get too political, but things could be better economically. So when you're trying to save money,
Mhm.
paying for a player's guide once in 2025 and then never needing another one until 2075 is, it works out pretty well
Yep.
in the long run.
Yep.
Uh, so,
Y- And video games, I think, to their detriment, have moved into a few habits, um, like loot boxes, pay to win, subscription services that you don't really own a game, but you can play it as long as you pay the rent, or something. Um, that that kind of stuff, and prices going up and stuff. So I think that's been to their detriment, which I think is a lot of what Sven Vink was saying at the last Game Awards. Who Sven runs Larian, who made Baldur's Gate 3,
mhm, mhm.
and from working with Sven, it's like he has a really good head on his shoulders, I think, for business, but he's also a gamer. Like, he is truly a gamer, so he understands it. He's not only thinking of it from a business perspective, but also from like, I play games and these things make me cranky and these things make me happy. you
Mhm.
know? um, so yeah, I'd say with digital games, I think they're probably going to go through some of that and either figure it out or not. Um, like I said, I would love to see uh, like more people hanging out and playing, but I think VTTs are also
Yeah.
a cool way to do it. Like I said, I have so many friends in different places that we would never be able to get together if we wanted to play a game. Uh, Not all of us, so that gives a tool to do it. Um, yeah, but I still also just like the. I also see a line there, and that to me is the weird line. When D&D was working, they were just starting to work on the VTT for D&D, just a little while before I left,
Yeah.
and
Which seems like maybe now we'll never see it, or maybe we
yeah,
will, or who knows?
yeah, I think they kind of killed the main thrust of it. They may salvage parts of it or put it out a certain way. Um, but I was kind of saying with that, where it's like,
Mhm.
uh, there's a very like you maybe could do something, but it's a very small target because
Yeah.
you're either a tabletop, you're either trying to be a tabletop game that feels more like a video game, or you're not a very good video game, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, because in my video game, I can make my own character for free. I can jump around. I can have all my abilities. I can do all this stuff. So there's amazing video games out there. And then for a VTT, it's like, a lot of times people want it just simpler. I want it to run a game. I'm going to run a game tomorrow night. I definitely don't want to spend a month designing something in a 3D
Yeah.
engine to
Yeah. Yeah.
play,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, I think these are the things to think about when they were talking about that. And I was like, you could do it, but I think you're threading a needle, on that. It's pretty tough. Um, Pretty tough thing to do. Yeah. And yeah, that to me is also, there's a lot of other people who were doing who have done VTTs for years. And I think they do a great job, a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was speaking of COVID, that was like a lucky hit where like
Hmm.
VTTs were pretty much working at least as well as you needed them to work when
Yep.
that hit. So there was a solution ready.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's one of those things too, where it's like, I used to describe it with like camping.
Hmm.
It's like, we're gonna revolutionize camping. Oh, what are you gonna do? It's like, well, first of all, you don't have to set up a tent or anything. We'll have a building there for you. Oh, okay, that sounds cool. And there'll be Wi-Fi, and you'll have like a stove and an oven. There'll be beds. There'll be this, and it's like, I think you invented the hotel, but it's in like a very inconvenient spot. Right?
Well, it's funny you say that because my wife tells me she wants to go glamping. She's like, I don't want to go real camping, but glamping, that looks like fun.
Oh, glamping, like pretend camping, like nice hotel.
No, glamorous camping. I think is what
Okay.
it's short for. So it's
Yeah.
like you go somewhere and they have like a tent or a teepee or something for you, and it's
Yep.
like, with down pillows and
Yes.
it's all like nice and soft, and there's a heater in the tent and everything.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we'll try it.
Hey, fair enough. Glamping. I'd never heard of that.
We used to live in Los Angeles, so it was like bigger outside of that, but we never had a chance before we left.
Yeah.
So I don't want to keep you too long. You've been a nice gent to hang out with me on a Tuesday evening. What do you got coming up? Where are you going to be? What should people keep an eye out for?
Well, I don't know. Follow me on Twitter. I'm always throwing stuff out there for like our game, or I'm just doing silly drawings, or I'm doing some poll, or Winston is giving away magic powers, kind of thing. And I really like that's me. Like I said, if you're looking for stuff I'm doing, that's where I'm updating things like Rudiger's.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. But I just, in general, I just like talking about games with folks on there. So get on there and poke me, and if I throw out questions, or if you got questions, throw it at me. I love that stuff. I like just chatting with people, especially about nerdy game stuff. Yeah.
So for anyone watching on YouTube, down in the description, there is a link to the X profile, and in the chat, pinned in the chat, I have a link to Richard's Instagram if you want to check out some awesome art. Yeah. So Richard, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you soon, everyone. Follow me at Yang Yan Zhao 4 on Twitter, on YouTube, and if you haven't, go click that subscribe button on either or, and we'll have more great guests coming up soon. I have CJ Leung, who is the creator of Cloudbreaker Alliance, who will be on next week. He is from Australia, so we're going to be talking about tabletop role-playing gaming in Asia, as well as trying to break into the China market, which should be quite interesting.
That's very interesting. All right.
Well,
thank you so much for having me. That was a great chat.
It was awesome. Hopefully, we'll see you again before too long.
Yep, I'll be around. I think, like, I'm pretty old. I could just drop dead any minute. So.
Oh, geez. That would be sad if this was the last interview you ever did. But
no.
All right.
I've like what was Aragorn's bloodline? My family's like
Numenorian.
Numenorian. I have like Numenorian blood.
Yep. So you'll be alive for 300 years.
Yep. Terrible people who live too long.
All right. Good night, everyone. We will see you soon.